Hi, hi. A little bit nicer today.
You spoke to the president this morning about the unemployment numbers.
So the unemployment numbers are very sad, but not shocking in that we know a lot of the experts predicted that they would be brutal, and they are. But that's precisely why the president and the vice president, Secretary Mnuchin, and the whole team have been negotiating around the clock with the Hill to get this package in place, the third of its kind in the last few weeks. And this one gives direct relief to individuals and distressed industries, $1,200 in a direct payment to Americans. If you're a family of four, at a certain income level, you get about $3,400 in direct payments. It can either be direct deposit, depending on your payroll configuration, or you can get a check. Secretary Mnuchin says the implementation would be in about the next 3 weeks or so. In addition to that, I think the relief for small businesses really shows the recognition of and appreciation for the fact that they are the backbone of our American economy, and they are disproportionately affected and suffering through this health crisis. So up to 2 months of wages for your employees through loan guarantees, so long as you keep them on the payroll.
But why hasn't the president commented publicly? He was pretty quick to comment on historically low numbers. He said nothing so far today.
Yeah, he said a lot today, maybe just not to you, respectfully.
Not to the people who are unemployed.
Well, that's not true. First of all, his action speaks as loud as his words in this case, because he is the person who's waiting for Congress to act as swiftly as he does on everything, get that to his desk, sign it into law so they'll get the relief. I just walked out here to do a TV hit before I'm speaking with you. I walked out of a call he was having with the governors, and they certainly talked about the unemployment numbers. He had the G20 call earlier, so he's busy talking to the other G19 leaders and the governors and the heads of DC and the tribal nations and the territories, where they did discuss this. But as Secretary Mnuchin and others point out, that's precisely why we have this package ready to go, ready for the president's signature. And I think the 370 some billion dollars for small businesses is really incredible, because so many of them, they can't make that payroll. They're in industries that are suffering grievously. They can't exactly telework. They rely on foot traffic and consumers to keep them going. So it's a recognition of that. Also, this stimulus package or relief package has over $100 billion in direct payments to hospitals, which I think is so incredibly important, because they are the frontline heroes, the healthcare workers, the first responders, the volunteers in our hospitals. Administrator Gaynor also spoke on the governor's call, telling them about surge supply. We're acquiring supplies from overseas. We're taking inventory state by state, clinic by clinic, hospital by hospital. I'm very happy to see Governor Cuomo of New York today in his lengthy press conference talk about how their PPE, they've got immediate cover for their immediate PPE needs covered. That doesn't mean all of them and forevermore, but immediately. So we knew it was going to be a very tough week in terms of unemployment claims, in terms of the number of cases, in terms of the number of deaths here and around the world. But that's why the president is talking to the G20 leaders today about a global pandemic. We are interconnected, but we're also all vulnerable, and we are connected by this. Steve? We have I don't know if the readout is public. I'll go like this. But they certainly discussed a number of ways that they can keep the minimal disruption, or minimize the disruption to the global trade supply chains, because we recognize that includes medical supplies that we need to keep going. They talked about safeguarding workers, and they certainly first and foremost talked about the health aspect of this, because as the president said 2 short days ago, this is a medical crisis before it's a financial crisis. So they discussed all of that. It's a very good conversation early this morning. Then the president had a couple of meetings and went right into the governor's call at noon. Darlene, and then, yes.
How did the Easter date,
Mario, and then Darlene.
Okay. How did the Easter date come about? How did the president pick that date? I know it's not a firm date, per what you all said, but how did that, is it arbitrary, or how did that come about?
Well, the president has been asked that question and answered it, so I'd refer you to his remarks, but I would refer you to all of his remarks, not just one that may, unfortunately, certainly not by you, be cherry-picked and distorted. He said that he was looking at around that time, but he will follow the facts and the data. And he said that in the press conference on Tuesday night. And he said, we'll follow the facts and the data. We'll listen to the scientists who now are looking at county by county data to try to find where the new clusters may be. Unfortunately, where our supplies are, where the testing is happening. I mean, we have close to 500,000 Americans have been tested that we know of, so it's probably a little bit higher. But the president said, the economy will gradually turn back on as appropriate, whether that's according to a certain industry, according to a certain geographic area. As you know, there are places that are much harder hit than others already. Peeking around the corner, we're starting to see a surge in cases in some new places. The governor of New Jersey was just talking about a 60% increase, I think, or so. You can check with his office, but it was about a 60% increase overnight. And that obviously includes heavily the commuting counties in and around New York City, which didn't go into lockdown until almost a week ago. Unfortunately, you have a mayor saying, I'm not playing politics, but you have a mayor saying, get on, look at me, I'm on the subway, go out in the town. He's told people through a tweet on March 2nd, go, quote, live your lives and go out in the town, and then recommended what show everybody goes see. So it's very unfortunate that we now have the spread in the whole New York metro area, which, as you all know, includes many parts of New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. I personally know people who commute from Pennsylvania into New York for work, into New York City for work. So we know that that's the epicenter, but we know many places are suffering, and that's why every governor is either on that call or represented on that call with the president, the vice president. Administrator Pete Gaynor of FEMA spoke, Dr. Debbie Burke spoke, Secretary Mnuchin spoke, probably other people spoke, but I had to come out here. But I think Easter, the president was giving people a lot of hope and basically telling this will last forever, and we'll see what happens over time. As he said, if we're still, if the data and the facts are that we're still nearing the apex or so, based on the scientific information, then we'll see. But he just wants Americans, first of all, he's thanking Americans because people are being so vigilant and so patient. And I think unlike many crises, people really feel like they're part of the solution. They can do the hand washing hygiene, they're doing the social distancing, they're hunkering down, and they're listening to their own governors and localities that sometimes have a different and somewhat more restrictive, I think about a third of the country I read, a more restrictive protocol in place right now to slow the spread. And we do hear from the scientists that that's working in many places, so we'll continue to hear that. I really think it's great that the president, the vice president, the scientists, the cabinet members go out and talk to each of you every day, and by extension to the country, because only a president can do that. Only a president can go into the briefing room here at the White House in front of the podium and say, here's the latest. But the president did make clear that we'll revisit that over time.
And what's the
Darlene, I'm sorry, I promised Darlene, and then...
What insight do you have into why the president said the other day that he's no longer going to call the coronavirus the Chinese virus, and he makes points? What insight do you have into why he changed his mind, and also why Secretary Pompeo continues to call it the Wuhan virus?
Well, Secretary Pompeo made clear that's where it originated. I think it was about February 8th. I'll go check, or you can certainly. I think the New York Times had a headline, Wuhan coronavirus. So I know people have new ways of explaining it, but let's not forget February 8th, 2020 was not 10 years ago. It was about a few weeks ago. So let's just be honest about what different people were calling it at different times and how that changed on the dime. I think that we say COVID-19, coronavirus, the president says Chinese virus, Secretary Pompeo wants to remind everybody. I think that Secretary Pompeo has been very active on the disinformation, what he sees as a different disinformation campaign, and reminding everybody where this started is a global pandemic. And I think to try to solve it and to try to prevent it from ever happening again when we get to that stage, many people are saying, let's make sure we understand how it all started, because it is new. It's a novel strain, that's why it's called the novel coronavirus. And I think that's all I need to say. I'm still waiting to hear the answer that I asked last week. I haven't got my answer yet.
I
Emerald?
want to follow up on one thing you said, and then I have another question. You were talking about the daily briefings, and it's important to have officials out talking to us, but some of the networks and outlets that they won't broadcast them anymore. What's your reaction to that?
I don't have a reaction to that except to say that's unfortunate, because the public is looking for information. I think the reason that those ratings are way up is because everybody's talking about this. Everybody's wondering about this. People are trying to get information. And when the president has updates that talk about, for example, yesterday, I believe his opening statements talked about the New York metro area. He talked about, it was either yesterday or the day before, he talked about how many N95 masks had been deployed and where, how many surgical masks, how many gloves or gowns, and that could have been Administrator Gaynor as well. But we're trying to give facts and figures so people understand what the surge supply looks like and where the hardest hit areas are. So I guess it's a decision they'll make, and they'll just go back to a bunch of people from their homes on Skype. Some were fluid at that than others, by the way, who really aren't health experts by and large. They were collusion experts, then they were impeachment experts, now they're coronavirus experts. I would say that there's great benefit to hearing from the president, the vice president, and members of the task force. And if you see the scientist standing there and the doctor standing there next to the president, the vice president, there's a reason they're standing there. They stand there as a team.
Then one more question on Joe Biden. So we're already talking about phase
Who?
4. We're talking about a phase 4 package, right? Joe Biden said yesterday that that could include Green New Deal policies. Would the president ever sign a stimulus package that had Green New Deal initiatives?
Well, that's Joe Biden speaking on behalf of a Democratic Party that has fallen so far to the left that they tried to sneak the new Green Deal. Some of them tried to screen Green New Deal, New Green Deal, Old Green Deal into this package. And they got caught doing that because when people say, I need relief, I'm out of work, my small business is about to go under, we all know it's through no fault of their own. There's been disruption everywhere. So the idea that people would play politics and try to use this as a Christmas tree to stuff ornaments on it that are their liberal projects was highly disappointing. But it was called out last week, and I think it got great attention. Thank you for amplifying it for those who did. And I mean, that's just Joe Biden hoping, I guess, that the Democratic Party is still paying attention to him. Joe Biden has a Democratic problem, as I told the Washington Post this weekend, which is that he's got the Democratic governors of the two largest states, Gavin Newsom and Andrew Cuomo, collaborating with and complementing the White House's efforts, the administration, and the president's efforts. So, but I'll leave the politics to later. That's just such an odd thing to say from the converted recreation room in Wilmington.
You probably, sorry if you talked about this at the top, but 3.3 million people filed for unemployment.
I did talk about it, yeah.
Could you just, I'm sorry, I finished.
It's okay.
Secretary Mnuchin said that those numbers aren't relevant right now. I know he was basically making the case that this is going to get worse, but people are also getting help. But could you just talk a little bit about?
Yeah, but that is exactly what he meant. The people are very relevant, and he's been working as hard as anybody, Secretary Mnuchin, over the course of about a week, round the clock through the weekend, with the speaker, with the leader, with members of both parties, and I think that's how we got to a 96-0 Senate vote yesterday, Yamish, and I think it's how we're going to go to the president's desk tomorrow with the third package in the last couple of weeks alone. And this one really goes to the heart of the small businesses, the hospital workers, the hospitals themselves, $27 billion or so for other replenishing our critical supplies, vaccine development. So there's a great deal of good in there. And Secretary Mnuchin was making the point that that those folks are going to get help here in this package. Those are terrible numbers. Those were expected numbers. But that's exactly why we tried to get ahead of it by having this package ready to go. And I don't know what's been taking so long. The president has had his pen in his hand for a very long time. So let's get that on his desk tomorrow. He said just said to the governors, it gets to my desk, I sign it.
And Darlene had a question about the idea of like what the thinking was behind President Trump not using the term Chinese virus.
I just answered it how I could. Yeah, how best I could. But I have noticed that a lot of the media who were saying that, and Wuhan, and hey, are you Peter Navarro? On Broken Thread. I don't have my own IFP yet. No, I didn't say he changed his mind. I said that it's been called many different things, but what it is a global pandemic. And I think that's where the focus needs to, I mean, I'm here to talk about what's in the bill and how we're helping people. So we can keep on going back to that, I guess, if you want to, but it feels small to me compared to the fact that a lot of your colleagues in the press were calling it the Wuhan coronavirus. I have the headlines on my desk if anybody needs a refresher. And number two, that no matter what we call it, the solutions have to be there. That's why the President of the United States was on the phone early this morning with the G20 leaders, the other G19 leaders, and then a couple other meetings with his team, and then right back at it with the nation's governors, tribal leaders, territory, and DC heads. And that's what's most important. I think we got to get to the solutions here. I'll get to you. He said he's going to sign the bill if it's what they say it is. It would pass the Senate last night 96-0. I know some people would like to make some changes to it. Maybe that'll come in a fourth iteration. Maybe that'll come overnight. But I think they're also, they being the Speaker, and let me say happy 80th birthday to Speaker Pelosi. That's incredibly impressive. God bless you. And so if it comes to his desk tomorrow, he said he's going to sign it.
Kellyanne?
Yes.
The Canadian foreign minister just said that her government is strongly opposed to a U.S. plan to post troops on the borders. What's behind putting troops on the Canadian border?
Well, you'd have to ask her what she means by that. I mean, we had a great joint statement last week, or I think it was last week, with Canada, and then later with Mexico. Obviously, commerce and trade will not be disrupted. People who commute from Canada and Mexico into the United States every day for work and are essential or critical workers who are still at work, not telecommuting, they will continue to be able to do that. So I'd really have to dig into that, but I don't know if she's.
CBP can't
Pardon?
CBP can't handle the situation because of the pandemic.
Well, I wouldn't read into that, although I know that those folks are overwhelmed because Obviously, they've already been overwhelmed in so many ways and doing a fantastic job. And frankly, all these first responders, whether healthcare workers, CPB, first responders elsewhere, volunteers, they are risking their own health to do this. And that is what I think of first and foremost when I think of them. Anyone else? Yes.
Just talk a little about what life is like social distancing in the West Wing. Are people working from home? What has that been like? What details can you provide?
So most people I see are around. Most people I see are around. Yes, most people who are who I would expect to see here, I see here, and we are social distancing when we're in the situation room and the overflow rooms for the task force meetings, for example. We have a couple seats between each of us, and I just had a couple meetings this morning in my office where the person was sitting all the way the other end of the table, and I think it's just become more natural, as it is probably for you, and that's important. It's important, A, because it's CDC guidelines. B, most importantly, I'll say B is most important, it will slow the spread according to the experts and has in different places. And 3, we all have to be good role models when it comes to the country watching all of us, you in the briefing rooms, or you in your TV hits, and doing that. So far so good with that, but yes, we are doing that. I think some people are teleworking, to answer your question, depending on their what their portfolios are here, and a number of them. I mean, I just held an opioids cabinet call because we usually meet on Tuesdays, every Tuesday in the EOB, and we weren't able to meet this week or last. So I had a call, and we had basically 110% attendance. There are new people on the call, so people are working. They're at their desk saying, the rest of our work goes on. What else can we be doing? Make sure we're meeting deadlines that are out there, for example. And in the case of that issue, not that you asked, but making sure that we're delivering medication-assisted therapies through telemedicine or through to people's doorsteps the way food delivery is. We're doing that with some of the pharmaceutical deliveries so they don't have a disruption or interruption in what they need to be in recovery.
As the president looks toward reopening the economy as soon as possible, are there particular business leaders, investors, economists that he's leaning on for advice or input?
Well, many. We can't even keep up with the number of business leaders who are calling even staffers, let alone the president, the vice president, the cabinet secretaries directly. And most of them don't call with, hey, you have to reopen the government. We have to, reopen the economy. Most of them are saying, here's how we think we can help. And I have to say, on a day with such harrowing unemployment numbers, it is very heartening to me to see all of the American companies who are actually hiring. So you have Amazon and Walmart, 6 figures worth of new employees with pay raises also for them. Kroger, I know, is on the list. Lowe's and Home Depot was on the list. There's my list. And I think maybe the VP will talk about this a little bit later too. But Papa John's, Dollar Tree, CVS Health. I mean, it's really terrific that people are, at a time when people are very nervous about the economy, obviously, and people are suffering employment disruptions in an unprecedented way, that you have people who are hiring. We hear every day from folks saying, hey, you wouldn't have thought that we have masks, but we do, and here they are. You wouldn't expect that they'd have masks, and here they are, and they're sending them either to FEMA or directly to the hospitals. It's been really incredible. Other people are making donations right to the Red Cross, I've noticed, or to other charities that they think will be suffering resources. Others are coordinating the food supply, medical supply chain. So it's been really heartening. I have a 1:30 call.
On the opioids, on the county by county data, are you seeing any uptick in terms of COVID-19 infections within communities that are ravaged by the opioid crisis?
Ooh, I would never make that overlay without discussing it with I have not talked to Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, or Admiral Jawar about any of that. But I will take a look at that. We did notice that the fentanyl and meth coming out of China has gone down. The cartels are complaining they don't have the analogs and the ingredients they need to make their poison. So maybe that's a little light in our tunnel right now, but I will take a look at that. I have not heard anybody mention a connection to that, so it would not be for me to say. Have a great day. I like the sunshine.
We will make America great again.